Well, this one for me is a unique video. It's expanding into an area that I haven't posted on yet, but have had some motivations to do so, people asking me about it and this and that. And then the catalyst was today that I had posted a picture on Facebook of Old Granddad Bourbon, and a friend joked to numb the pain. And this is a wonderful friend, great character to her. I think the world of her, and I know she would never suggest that seriously, but I am aware I like to kid, and it came to something where I said, well, for one thing, I don't want any misunderstandings, and for another thing, this is a topic that is worth discussion. So anyway, so here I am offering a video that's at least a humble introduction to building your or stocking your liquor cabinet, as you will. I would offer that there are people that are far more knowledgeable than me on this, both online and even among my friends. I don't consider myself an authority in it, or even that I have anything more than like maybe 3 years of genuine experience with it. So, but again, I've had people asking me, and maybe even I'll be in a liquor store and find somebody looking around completely lost, and I'll offer some thoughts based on what I see them observing, and find myself having a nice, enjoyable conversation with them, and they walk away smiling and happy with, hopefully happy in the long run with what they end up with, but walking away happy, and that's a good thing. So hopefully this video will offer some enjoyment and happiness to people, particularly, again, my friends. Everybody has a different approach to things, and that's all fine and good. This is simply what my current approach and perspective is on it from the poverty of my own knowledge in this topic. So take it as you will. I wanted to offer some thoughts on drinking in general, and my approach to the drinks, and then we'll move on to different topics to hopefully help people out. When it comes to drinking, when I was in college, I drank much larger quantities, which seems to be the way of things often. In college, you're more likely to do damage to yourself than the things you enjoy. From my perspective, and I'm not looking to offend anybody, I'd like to think that was basically a youthful, shall we say, approach, or kid's way of drinking. There might be a touch of rebellion to it, and at the time I found that among my friends I developed a bit of a reputation as having a high tolerance and being able to drink a lot without it really affecting me. And for some reason that's perceived as being a badass, at least in that way. And I'll confess that I got kind of sucked into that a little bit, which encouraged me. And none of my friends at the time meant any harm with that. But that was sort of my approach with it at the time, whereas now I really don't understand why that's considered badass, and I just like to enjoy it and more fully enjoy it. So I'll have smaller amounts and approach it in a way where I think I get more out of it and can appreciate what I'm drinking and the flavors of it on a deeper level. And as somebody who I'll mention later in this likes to say, he suggests drink a lot. No, he says drink a little bit often. So as opposed to drinking a lot at one time, and we'll get into many reasons why that makes a lot of sense. This glass is the Glencairn glass, and this is my preferred glass when it comes to whiskeys like scotch, to bourbons, to rums, just about anything, because the shape of it tends to accentuate the aromas. You have, the aromas are part of the tasting experience, so you get a fuller experience of the flavors. And what I like to do almost every day, if the mood takes me, is I'll take literally a finger or two of whatever I happen to be drinking that day in my collection, and a finger is, measured by the width of your finger. 1 or 2 fingers is the most I tend to have. Everything in moderation, including moderation, as they say again. And I'll take maybe a finger or two of whatever I choose for that day, and I'll pour it in, and I'll let it sit for a bit and just kind of air out. And then I will spend some time scenting it. I'll sniff it and just enjoy what aromas come to my nose. And this sort of informs the taste buds as to what's coming. But part of the fun is sometimes what you get on the nose of it is not going to be the same as to what you get on the palate, what you taste in it. So that can offer a little bit more interest and variety to the experience as well. And sometimes the nose doesn't lie, and it's all there in the palate as well. But whatever the case, I like to spend some time smelling it. Then I'll take a sip of it, and I don't swallow it right away. I'll hold it in my mouth for a bit and let my tongue kind of figure out what's in this. What different notes can I enjoy? And you sort of get a little bit more out of it that way. It's almost similar to once in a blue moon I enjoy a cigar, and when you smoke a cigar, you don't go puff, puff, puff. You take a drag of it, you have it in your mouth for a bit, and you blow it out, and you're enjoying the flavor in between puffs. Well, the same thing can be with any of these stronger liquors. You can take a sip of it and be still enjoying it long after that sip, and long after you swallowed what was in your mouth. You don't have to keep chugging it to really enjoy it. In fact, you can enjoy it on deeper levels if you take your time with it. So that's sort of my approach to how I drink in general. Now then there's the topic of what, if anything, do you put in it? Well, personally, I prefer my drinks neat for the most part, and I think at least at first, when you're first meeting a drink, it's better to meet it in its most natural state and, take a drink of it and try it neat, scent it neat, see what it's like just in its, as the person made it. Then when it comes to adding water or ice, on the topic, you'll get different input on this. Some traditionalists will say never to add anything and most certainly not to add ice. I think the whole point of all of this is to enjoy it. And so enjoy it however you happen to like it. That's the whole point. In fact, I had one friend say, I've been wanting to get more into that stuff, but I don't like it. Well, why do you want to get into it if you don't like it? She sees it as a social necessity, which I disagree with that. I don't think it should be a necessity. I think either you like it or you don't. And if you don't like it, don't bother with any of this. But so far as how you drink it however you like it. Who cares what anybody thinks? I will say that adding ice to it, the cold does kill the flavor. So you're not going to be getting the full offering of what's in there. But if that's how you like it, take it that way. When it comes to water, there's two reasons to add water. First time I'm meeting a drink, I like to try it neat, like I said, and then I also like to try it with a little bit of water, because the water can actually make some of the flavors, some of the tasting notes sort of blossom in there. It can bring something more out of it and a different side to it, and it's not always a good side necessarily. Some of these drinks like water, some of them don't, and that can be also a matter of individual opinion too. So far as how much to add, I would just start with a few drops, 1 or 2 drops, and then maybe work to a teaspoon, and then take it from there. Add a little bit at a time, and then see what works for you in getting the right balance if you decide to add water. But it will bring out different tasting notes for it. It's not necessarily about the strength, and that's the second reason to be adding water. One is to see what the water does to it, but the second reason is, and this again will vary from person to person, if it's so strong that it's burning your mouth and your taste buds are getting burnt and you're not getting the full flavor of it, then you're not fully enjoying what it has to offer. So there's no point in drinking it straight and neat if it's taking away from your experience. That's one reason to be adding some water to it as well. So don't be bashful about adding more water based on how it feels to you until you can get it to a place where it's not beating the heck out of you. There's no point in that. It is not necessarily about the ABV or the proof of the alcohol, how quote-unquote strong it is. There, you will find that sometimes, for example, Booker's bourbon is, I think, like 126 proof, which you think, wow, I'm definitely going to need some water in this. But actually, from my experience anyway, you don't need water in it. It does do something nice to it. If you add a little water, it adds something different. So sometimes if I'm in the mood, I'll add some water to it, and sometimes I'll have it neat, and it doesn't actually beat me up. And there's stuff that's actually much lower in proof that I need to add more water to personally, because it does have that too much kick, even at a lower strength. So it's not about how much alcohol content necessarily. So that's just something to be aware of. So far as tasting notes go, there's some of it's just a matter of opinion, and be aware that these flavors that you get out of it, if you're drinking a liqueur, that's one thing. There might be actual content in there, but if you're drinking a whiskey, if you're drinking a scotch, if you're drinking a bourbon, and you're tasting cherry, or if you're tasting fruits or whatever, those are not actually in there. It's just something in the flavor that reminds your brain of these things. So I might drink something and I might taste pear in it, and you might drink the same thing and you might taste a note of apple in it instead. And it's not necessarily that one of us is right and the other is wrong. Actually, we're both right, because it's what happens to come to our minds. And some people are way more experienced and perhaps more advanced and sophisticated, and they will taste a whole array of things that you and I might never even get out of it, and that's all fine and good. So that's when it comes to scenting and tasting it, these different tasting notes. For example, if you are allergic to nuts and you taste a bourbon that tastes like it's got nuts in it, there's no actual nut content in there. You might find that your body kind of balks at it, because if you're allergic to nuts, they have an adverse, your body has an adverse reaction to them, and so you might just be tasting it and it's making your body remember this, but there's no actual nut content in it, so it's not going to have that same adverse effect on you, even though you might dislike it for the same reasons of that association. When it comes to adding water, be aware that just like with tea or anything else, the quality of water that you use will make a difference. If you're making tea and you use tap water, as opposed to if you're making tea and you use spring water, it's going to make a difference in the flavor. I personally recommend a good distilled water. I have a bottle of Smart Water and I'll just use the cap. Some people get these fancy glass straws and dip it in. I don't see it as necessary. If it makes you happy, fine. But I just use the cap of it, and I'll do a few drops to a full cap, depending, and also depending on my familiarity with the particular bottle. So the quality of water that you use is going to make some difference. Let's get on to actually collecting. I didn't sit down someday and say, you know what, I want a liquor cabinet and I want to stock a liquor cabinet. I want a collection. It didn't happen that way. There was something that I had once, and I can't even remember what my first bottle was, and I said, this is good, and I ended up getting myself a bottle of it. And then, I being moderate in how much I have, like I said, only maybe a finger or two a day on it, if that, made that bottle last for a long time. And then at some point I encountered something else. I said, this is yummy too, and I haven't bought a bottle in a couple of months, and it's payday, and I can manage this, it's within my budget. So I got that bottle, and then you're on to the next one. And as your collection expands and you have more bottles in that, but you're only drawing a little bit from each, it makes it easier and easier for that collection to last. I find that a bottle will last me a long time. Some of my bottles I've had for well over a year, maybe even 2 years or more. And I find that at the strength of those hard liquors, I guess we'll call them, maybe they go down a little bit in their oomph, but really not much. I find that they preserve very well over time. I don't know how many years that'll last for. Again, my experience is somewhat more limited, but I find that they'll last you a while, and that helps the collection to expand. As you get one, after a while you get another. If you have a very high budget, I would still not recommend trying to fill your liquor cabinet all at once. This is something that's an exploration, it's a journey. Do it a little at a time, and you'll find it will also expand more intelligently that way. You'll be more informed in what you want to get. So that's how I found myself building my collection, if you would call it that, of, hey, this is good. But then if you like me, if you find yourself saying, well, gee, I do have a bit of a collection going, and I'd like to stock a full liquor cabinet and work my way to having a full collection, then the question is, well, how do I expand from there? And there's a number of suggestions that I'll offer here for that. One is just friends. If you have friends who share this, what I guess for me, has become a hobby. And if it becomes a hobby for you, if you have friends who share that hobby, you might say to each other, hey, try this. You might hang out together and, have you tried this one yet? I got this new bottle. One of the things to watch out for that is some of your friends may be a little more enthusiastic in the portions that they like to have. If you can moderate that, it will help your collection to last longer. Again, I take a finger or two per time, and I try to keep it under control when I have friends over as well. Like everything in moderation, including moderation. Once in a while, I'll have some more, and my friends will have some more. But realize that even a full glass will take a chunk out of that bottle. So you want to try to keep it down to reasonably. But if among your friends you say, hey, try this, and they might say to you sometime when you're over their house, or they might bring something over and say, you got to try this. That'll expand what you experience, and you'll find what you like and what you don't like. So far as bars go, I've never been to a dive bar I don't like. The prices tend to be fantastic, and I just also happen to like the vibe and decor. But they do tend to have somewhat limited selection. But if you go to a number of them, you'll find different ones have different options, and especially when you're new to it, well, here's stuff that you haven't tried, and you can get it at a good price. Regular bars, I guess I'll call it, some of them will offer samples, at least at a very much lower price. If it's a bar that you are frequent, like a regular at, they might offer you a sample for free even. But generally speaking, my experience with most bars is that you're just buying a glass. And the problem with that, from my experience, and again, be aware that different states, different areas, the prices of these bottles and the prices of getting a drink are going to vary. But speaking from my own experience in my area, but ordering a glass of bourbon, a glass of scotch, you are usually between a quarter to a third, maybe even a halfway through the price of buying the entire bottle. So sometimes it's worth doing a little research and just rolling the dice on getting a bottle. Especially, again, if you have friends who share this hobby, you get a bottle and you've tried it a few times and you say, hey, this one's really not something that it's all right, but it's not for my collection to keep. Or, I really don't like this one. Well, maybe one of your friends would like it, and then you could do a swap, whether it's them buying you a cheaper bottle that you're interested in, since your bottle is open already, or them just saying, I got this, maybe you like this, and you just trade off, and that helps kind of buffer that mistake that might happen from time to time, where you get one and you thought you would like it and turned out to really not be your thing. Be aware that every once in a while you'll get a bottle that's something you might like, but just that something funky with that bottle. It doesn't even necessarily mean it's bad, but those things are, the way they produce these things, there's at least some measure of consistency, but every once in a while you might get something that is not your typical representation of what that bottle's like. I'm cheating looking at some notes I wrote down because I didn't want to say the same thing over and over again. So yeah, friends, bars, the internet, not my favorite. Going to websites is not my favorite source. Again, there is a matter of opinion to an extent in what you will taste and scent from a particular selection. And I find the internet doesn't always offer me, the web pages don't always offer me the best representation. However, I will say that Total Wine, which is a major liquor store chain, at least in my area, and they have very good prices, and their website usually offers tasting notes that can be at least somewhat helpful, at least give you a hint. Sometimes you go to the distillery's website. Let's say you like Glenfarclas, or you're interested in Glenfarclas Scotch. You can go to their website and see what they themselves have to say about their different options that they sell. And their tasting notes you might not always agree with. For me, there are three main sources on YouTube that I find helpful and enjoyable as well. One is whiskey.com, which I know I'm saying a website, but you'll find that on YouTube. This guy named Luning Horst Luning, guy with a German accent, and he offers a lot of different reviews, and he will go in great detail on it and offer you background and informative stuff. But one thing I also like about those videos is, for the most part, particularly the newer ones, in the description he will have the tasting notes right there. And if you're interested in also sort of just seeing what he has to say, It usually often puts also what time in his video he will start the scenting and the tasting and sharing those notes with you. So you have something that's very informative, but you can also get down to the skinny of it. And I find that personally, what he comes up with, what tasting notes and scenting notes and whatnot he comes up with, happens to be very much similar to what my impressions are of these selections. So I find him reliable, personally speaking. Ralphie.com, here's a guy who's been doing it a very long time, a lot of videos as well. Just a charming, very nice guy, it seems, and just kind of fun to watch, very informative. For me, he sometimes kind of goes on a bit, which I know is ironic, but he will offer more detail than I'm looking for sometimes, and while it's fun to watch, I don't always have the time or energy for it. Also, his tasting notes are so sophisticated, he'll be coming up with flavors and scents that I'm not even familiar with. So for me, that's not always necessarily that helpful, but I do sometimes like at least just watching for fun and also just getting his overall impression on something of how good it is, how excited is he about this particular selection. Is it something he recommends in the first place? So that's another way, another source. And the third one, there's whiskeyvault.com, which has these two guys. Again, there's a lot of knowledge behind what they offer. They do go on a bit sometimes. They can be very entertaining, and there's an interesting interaction and interplay between the two. I find that I don't always agree with what they come up with either, but it's a source, it's fun, and those three are the main people that I'll find that I can get good reviews on different things that I'm looking at, and from there you'll explore for yourself, and you're going to start off looking for stuff that obviously you already know you like, but out of those things you will find that you will run into other things that you say, oh, I like this tasting note as well, and you'll start pursuing that, and so it'll naturally expand. This again is why it makes sense to not try to do this all at once. Let it grow with time, because you will find that your interests and your knowledge will grow over that time, and your collection will diversify naturally. So that's on how to build it and how to research it and let it diversify. Now, on the topic again of moderation, for one thing, you need to stick within your collection, within your budget in order to build this collection. And again, I limit what I'm willing to spend, both within my budget and also beyond that within my sensibilities. And that's one thing that'll help you build over time. But moderation, there's a few things. One, you don't want to take too much away from it, as I said, because if you drink too much, your collection's not going to last. So you don't want to drink too much at one sitting or too much too often. But this also comes into a health concern. I think we have to be aware that it is alcohol, which is a more potentially addictive substance. However, this can apply to a number of different things. I've had friends who've let their instrument collection grow significantly to the point where I get a little concerned from time to time. You could come home once a week and say, once a week I'm going to enjoy myself a nice steak, and you can love that steak and it can make you feel good and be something that you enjoy, and is perfectly fine. And then maybe you find yourself having it twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, every day. Anything can become an excess that then can become unhealthy. So I think that it's worth saying and advocating with this topic not to let it get out of hand, to be mindful and watchful of that. There are things in life, alcohol, food, sex, things that you can enjoy that are healthy, that you want to make sure it doesn't impose on your life, impose on your family, impose on your health, impose on your budget, your work, any of that stuff. You don't want to let any of these things get out of hand. You want to enjoy them, and you want to keep them a positive presence in your life and not let it turn into a negative. So if you find that you're having more and more, try to tailor that back for numerous reasons, all the reasons that I told you. Try to keep it in moderation. And if you find that it's becoming a problem, or, sometimes you don't notice things yourself and you have to rely on trusted loved ones and their input. If you find yourself thinking it's become a problem, if you have to step away from it for a while, step away from it for a while. And if you have to step away from it for good, please do so. If you have friends who you associate with any of these activities, it can be alcohol, again, there's numerous things that can overwhelm your life. If you have friends that you associate with that, and they're really, truly friends of yours, they will accept and support your stepping back from this stuff. They will still be your friends. You will always be a part of that group, even if you don't participate in what they're doing. So if that becomes a concern or whatnot, don't let that get in the way of your health. You really don't want the physical problems, the long-term problems that can happen. And I will share with you personally too, when I was in college, I went through this one rough stretch, and to be honest, and I'm being very open here, I basically crawled inside a bottle myself. I made a point to always make it to class, and I actually made Dean's List a bunch of those times anyway, but because I was always in class. But I mean, I'd go to class and then I'd walk to the bar and have a lot of drinks and come back, and there was times when I was having way too much. And I don't think I became truly an alcoholic, because it's my understanding that if you're an alcoholic, that's for life. You really can't go back to it. And I think that sometimes it's not necessarily out-and-out alcoholism. It can be even OCD getting part of it. It can be whatever you're dealing with. But whatever the case, if it becomes problematic. So, I was trying to self-medicate with it, as they say. And I can tell you from experience, that whole, again, as a friend posted, numb the pain. I can tell you from experience that, at least from my experience, that alcohol is a poor anesthetic. For me anyway, I found that, of course, since I was doing it more and in more quantity, I could drink more and more, so it had less and less of an effect on me. Even when it was having effect on me, it maybe seemed to take the edge off of the pain of what I was going through at the time, but there are limits to what it does. And above and beyond anything, you're, on one hand, health-wise doing yourself damage, and on the other hand, it's not going to fix anything. It's not going to address truly whatever problems are in your life that's driving you to looking for something to crawl into and hide behind, whether alcohol or weed or whatever substance or habit you turn to that could be damaging. There's some things we can turn to that can be positive, that can be helpful, but clearly there are some things that we can turn to during our times of difficulty that can be damaging, and they're not fixing things. They're not addressing the problem. They're not truly making you happy. You may, for time, feel the illusion of that it's helping you, but it's not. So please, my own personal message to you, be careful that this does not become something that you turn to solve your problems. I know the joke, alcohol, scientifically speaking, is a solution. It's funny. But we have to, there's fun and games, there's times to kid, and there's times to be serious about something and say, all right, all kidding aside. So the two things that I would say about this whole topic, if you decide to get into it, if you decide to make this a hobby, if you find yourself getting into it and making it a hobby, and you want to make this build, is be careful that it doesn't take over and become a financial burden or a burden to you and your family. Be careful that in times that you're going through tough times, it doesn't become a sort of cradle or crutch for you, because it's not going to work. It's not going to fix your problems. Anyway, that's basically all I can think of at the moment anyway to share. And again, this is just basically a humble little introduction to this. Again, since this is geared towards friends who can reach me one way or another, if you have any further questions, if you have any further things that I might be able to share with you in your journey, please, of course, let me know. And if you're somebody who just happened to stumble upon this video and find it helpful, and you want to comment a few questions here and there, I'd be happy to help in any way I can. This whole thing is to help people enjoy something that can be a positive presence in their life, a source of enjoyment. So I do hope you enjoy, and I wish you a great day and a great life. Take care.